Most people believe paying their mortgage as fast as possible is the smartest financial move. It sounds responsible. It sounds safe. But what if that belief is quietly draining your future wealth? What if the habit you were taught to follow is the very reason your money never feels free? Today, we're going to break a rule that almost everyone accepts without thinking. And once you understand the logic behind it, you'll never look at your mortgage the same way again. Most people are taught that safety comes from removing obligations, from shrinking balances, from watching a number slowly crawl towards zero. It feels clean, responsible, almost moral. Each payment creates a small emotional reward, a sense that life is becoming lighter. But that feeling often disguises something deeper and more dangerous: the belief that eliminating a visible risk automatically creates real security. Safety is not the absence of debt on paper. Safety is the presence of control in real life. The two are not the same, and confusing them quietly traps many people for decades. True financial control is about flexibility. It is about having choices when circumstances change, when opportunities appear, or when shocks arrive without warning. A paid-off obligation may remove a monthly bill, but it can also remove liquidity, leverage, and optionality if it was achieved by draining resources that could have served multiple purposes. When money is locked into a single asset, it becomes obedient to that asset's rules. It cannot move, cannot adapt, cannot defend you in unrelated areas of life. The illusion of safety feels comforting precisely because it is simple, but simplicity can be expensive when it limits your ability to respond. People often underestimate how unpredictable life actually is. Job security feels solid until it isn't. Health feels stable until it suddenly demands attention. Markets appear calm until volatility arrives without invitation. In those moments, what matters most is not whether a balance once reached zero, but whether you can act quickly without selling at the wrong time, borrowing under pressure, or making decisions driven by fear. Control is the ability to pause, to choose, to wait. Safety without control collapses the moment reality refuses to cooperate. There is also a psychological element that makes the illusion so powerful. Debt feels heavy because it is visible. You see the statement, you remember the obligation. The mind treats visible threats as more dangerous than invisible ones. Opportunity cost, lost flexibility, and reduced cash reserves are invisible risks, so they rarely receive the same emotional weight. Yet invisible risks often cause the most lasting damage. Money tied up too tightly cannot protect you from mistakes, nor can it help you take advantage of moments that could change your trajectory. Another layer of this illusion comes from equating ownership with freedom. The idea that once something is fully paid for, it is truly yours suggests a final destination. But ownership without liquidity can still be fragile. Taxes continue, maintenance continues, economic conditions change. Control is not about owning more things outright. It is about owning time, options, and the ability to make calm decisions under pressure. A person with flexible resources often has more real freedom than someone who owns assets, but lacks maneuverability. Many people rush towards certainty because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Paying something off promises closure. It draws a clear line between before and after. But financial strength is rarely built on closure. It is built on endurance. Endurance requires systems that survive stress, not just structures that look neat on a spreadsheet. When you prioritize emotional comfort over strategic resilience, you may feel safer while actually becoming more exposed to future shocks. Control also means understanding the difference between risk that can hurt you and risk that only feels scary. Not all obligations are equal. Some obligations are rigid, expensive, and unforgiving. Others are predictable, manageable, and offset by resources that grow elsewhere. Treating all obligations as enemies creates a mindset where defense replaces strategy. The goal is not to eliminate every perceived threat, but to neutralize the ones that can permanently damage your position while keeping tools that allow growth and adaptation. There is a quiet cost to over-prioritizing the feeling of being debt-free. It can discourage learning, analysis, and patience. When the primary goal becomes emotional relief, Decisions are made to reduce anxiety rather than increase long-term strength. Control requires tolerating some level of discomfort, understanding trade-offs, and resisting the urge to simplify complex realities into comforting slogans. Wealth is not built by avoiding complexity, but by managing it intelligently. Another misunderstanding lies in the belief that progress must always be linear and visible. Watching a balance fall feels like progress you can touch. Building reserves, maintaining flexibility, or positioning yourself for future opportunities feels abstract. Yet abstract advantages compound quietly. The person who can wait, who can absorb a shock without panic, who can act when others are forced to retreat, holds a form of safety that cannot be easily measured, but is deeply powerful. Real safety is dynamic, not static. It adjusts as conditions change. It allows you to make decisions from a place of strength rather than obligation. When your resources are structured to give you room to breathe, think, and respond, you are less vulnerable, even if a balance still exists somewhere on a statement. Control means the obligation does not control you. The moment your financial structure dictates your behavior, your sense of safety is already compromised. The illusion of safety thrives because it offers certainty in a world that rarely provides it. But certainty achieved by sacrificing flexibility often comes at the wrong price. Financial independence is not about reaching a symbolic milestone. It is about building a position that can survive uncertainty without forcing you into bad choices. Control is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle change, not the temporary relief of seeing a number disappear. When you shift your thinking from eliminating visible discomfort to maximizing real-world resilience, the entire conversation changes. You begin to ask better questions, not how fast can I get rid of this, but what structure gives me the most control over my future, not what feels safest today, but what keeps me strongest over time. That shift separates emotional security from actual security, and once you see the difference, it becomes difficult to unsee, because true safety does not announce itself loudly. It simply allows you to move through uncertainty without fear, pressure, or forced decisions, quietly working in the background while, the RS mistake comfort for control. Money is often judged by its price rather than its purpose. People are trained to look at interest rates as the enemy, assuming that any cost attached to borrowing automatically makes it harmful. But the real danger is rarely the visible percentage printed on a statement. The real danger is what your money is prevented from doing while you rush to eliminate that percentage. Cheap debt feels threatening because it is explicit, while opportunity cost is silent, invisible, and therefore underestimated, even though it often extracts a far higher price over time. When borrowing costs are low, predictable, and spread over long periods, they behave differently from expensive, unstable obligations. They do not aggressively erode your position. Instead, they quietly coexist with your financial structure. The mistake many people make is treating low-cost obligations as emergencies, pouring excess cash into eliminating them while ignoring the compounding power of alternative uses. In doing so, they exchange a small manageable cost for a much larger hidden loss, the loss of future growth, flexibility, and scale. Opportunity cost is difficult for the human brain to respect because it does not feel like pain in the present. You never receive a bill for the gains you didn't earn. There is no notification that tells you how much potential slipped by while your money sat still. Yet over long periods, opportunity cost becomes one of the most expensive forces. In finance, it accumulates quietly, year after year, turning conservative decisions into surprisingly costly ones. When viewed in hindsight, there is a difference between being debt-averse and being capital efficient. Debt aversion is emotional. It seeks comfort. Capital efficiency is logical. It seeks results. When money is diverted to remove a low-cost obligation, it is no longer available to earn, learn, or position itself for growth. The trade-off is not between debt and peace of mind, but between present comfort and future capacity. Many people unknowingly choose comfort because it feels virtuous, even though it limits their long-term outcomes. Another misunderstanding comes from assuming that paying something down is the same as building wealth. Reducing a balance feels productive because it is measurable. But wealth is not just the absence of liabilities. It is the presence of assets that grow, adapt, and generate options. When you allocate aggressively toward eliminating cheap obligations, you may be shrinking your balance sheet while also shrinking your ability to expand it later. The numbers look cleaner, but the engine becomes smaller. Cheap debt can act as a stabilizer. When used responsibly, it allows assets to remain productive instead of being liquidated prematurely. It gives time for compounding to work, which is one of the few forces that does not require constant effort. Compounding needs duration more than intensity. When you interrupt it to chase emotion, milestones, you reset the clock repeatedly, never allowing momentum to fully develop. The fear of debt often comes from stories of excess and collapse. Those stories are real, but they are not caused by low-cost controlled obligations. They are caused by leverage without discipline, speculation without margin for error, and confidence without humility. Treating all borrowing as equally dangerous ignores context. The same tool that destroys someone who misuses it can empower someone who understands its limits. The difference lies not in the existence of debt, but in its structure, cost, and purpose. Opportunity cost also includes missed learning. Capital that remains flexible allows experimentation, education, and adaptation. When resources are locked into one outcome, you lose the ability to respond to new information. Markets evolve, industries shift, personal circumstances change. Money that has been irreversibly committed to eliminating a cheap obligation cannot be redeployed when better uses appear. Over time, this rigidity compounds into stagnation. There is also a timing element that is often ignored. Money has seasons. There are periods when deploying capital aggressively creates outsized returns, and periods when patience is the wiser move. If you have already committed your resources to eliminating low-cost obligations, you remove your ability to act during favorable windows. You become a spectator, watching opportunities pass while telling yourself you are bay. NG responsible. Responsibility without awareness can still be costly. People often say they want certainty, but what they really want is control over outcomes. Ironically, eliminating cheap debt reduces control by narrowing future choices. Control comes from having resources available when decisions must be made. It comes from being able to say no to bad options and yes to good ones without urgency. Cheap debt that is comfortably managed does not remove control. It can enhance it by freeing capital to work elsewhere. Another overlooked factor is inflation's effect on cheap obligations. Over time, money tends to lose purchasing power, while fixed payments remain constant. This shifts the real cost downward as incomes and prices rise. Paying aggressively against something whose real burden is already declining can mean sacrificing capital that could have adjusted upward with economic growth. Opportunity cost grows while the obligation quietly becomes easier to carry. The emotional satisfaction of being done often overshadows rational comparison. Being finished feels like progress, but progress should be measured by resilience and capacity, not just closure. Financial maturity involves learning to tolerate incomplete feelings in exchange for better outcomes. It means understanding that some things are better managed than eliminated, especially when elimination comes at the expense of long-term strength. The most damaging aspect of ignoring opportunity cost is that it reshapes behavior. It teaches people to prioritize what feels good now over what works best over time. That habit extends beyond money into decision-making more broadly. Once you train yourself to trade future advantage for present relief, it becomes harder to build anything that requires patience, uncertainty, and delayed rewards. When you evaluate decisions through the lens of opportunity cost, the question changes. It is no longer how fast can I get rid of this, but what am I giving up by doing so? That question introduces depth, context, and realism. It forces you to compare a known manageable cost with an unknown but potentially powerful benefit. Most people avoid this comparison because it requires thought rather than emotion. Cheap debt is not a blessing and it is not a curse. It is a tool that can either restrict or enable depending on how it is treated. The real danger is not the small interest you pay, but the large future you never allow to form because your capital was too busy chasing the comfort of zero instead of the quiet power of growth that unfolds slowly, invisibly, and unevenly, rewarding those who understand that the most expensive decisions are often the ones that feel safest at the moment.